Hi everyone, in this talk, I'm going to talk about how to join operational work smoothly when you join a new team, such as manual recovery operations, triaging alerts, addressing incidents, and so on. Such troubleshooting is essential, especially for SRE guys, but it's difficult for new members because you don't understand how your systems work enough yet. This talk will give you some tips on quickly catching up your service-specific knowledge and contributing to your team from early on. I'm Kazuki, a senior backend engineer at Autify. In Autify, the responsibility of our backend engineer role includes infrastructure development and operations like incident handling, being in on-call rotations, etc. Autify is a startup company which provides an AI-based software test automation platform. We have two products, Autify for Web and Autify for Mobile. I'm involved in the development and operations of the Autify for Web service. The idea in this talk is based on my experience at Autify. First, I would like to discuss what makes us difficult to join service operation. Troubleshooting is one of the critical activities for anyone who operates web services. It's often viewed as an innate skill that some people have and others don't. However, the book titled Reliability Engineer shows a general model of troubleshooting process. It's beneficial to analyze what makes us difficult to join service operations, so let me explain it briefly. First, troubleshooting starts with a problem report. For example, metrics alerts, application exception, customer inquiries, etc. After then, we can look at system telemetry and logs, such as server metrics, error logs, and so on. Through this exercise, we can understand the current state of the system and identify possible causes. When you find potential solutions, we can actively treat the system, that is, change the system in a controlled way, and observe the results. This is a general process of troubleshooting. But when you join a new team, there are some challenges. Regarding the triage phase, let's say you get an alert that CPU utilization is over 90%. Once receiving the problem report, you need to consider whether you have to take action immediately after answering the following questions in your mind. Is this alert the first time your team has? Which workflow is the server used for? Do users use the services? Or only for internal use? Is it a non-issue for the team? However, you will not have enough knowledge to answer these questions yet when you just joined. The book Practical Monitoring mentioned in the context of alerts. They said generally there are two different alerts. The first one is alert meant to wake someone up. This kind of alert requires action to be taken immediately, or else the system will go down. For example, when all web servers are unavailable, we should take action immediately. The second one is alerts meant for your information. It doesn't require any immediate action, but someone ought to be informed that it occurred. For example, when an overnight backup job failed, it ought to be informed to database engineers so that they recognize they may need to take action the next business day. Contextual judgment is one challenge to join operational work. It highly depends on knowing its failure patterns. After a few months of watching various alerts, you may get the hang of it, but it will take time. Also, in the examine and diagnose and later phase, there are problems. Even if you can figure out the severity of problem reports, you need knowledge of how the system is built, how it should operate, and its failure modes. Basically, the exercise depends upon two factors. The first one is an understanding of how to troubleshooting generically. The second one is a solid knowledge of the system. For example, let's say you get a problem report that queuing processing has stopped and the number of waiting events has increased. To solve this case, you need to know such information. What events the queuing system handles? Are there any known possible causes? Have we implemented the retries mechanism? So again, lack of service knowledge becomes an issue here. So far, I introduced the troubleshooting process and mentioned that the lack of service understanding can be a challenge within that process. Next, I'm gonna explain 3 pieces of advice to start participating in service operation work. Firstly, I would advise you to look at problem reports, even if you are not sure about them. When you see problem reports that you're not sure about, click link to them. It doesn't matter if you can't directly contribute to solving the problem. Let yourself be yourself and keep looking at incoming reports in a casual manner. It's a good idea to set a time box. In other words, a time limit. For example, 30 minutes. As too much time may interfere with your main work. The more you jump into problem reports, the more knowledge you gain about problem patterns. The next piece of advice is to leave what you will learn in documents. After going into detail about alerts, let's create a blank page in an internal documentation system. In the case of Outify, we use Notion as a knowledge sharing system and use Datadog as an observability platform. So I create a blank page in Notion or sometimes create a new investigation note in Datadog. Then, leave what you will learn in the document. For example, when you have learned about the system architectures related to the problem, write them down briefly. It's also recommended to note any similar cases you find that have occurred in the past. This will help you visualize your learning. To participating in operations, trust is essential. Making your learning visible leads to letting your peers know how much you understand about how your system works and how to diagnose atypical system behaviors. In the book 97 Things Every SRE Should Know, Laurie Hochstein, who is an engineer of Netflix, recommends watching Expert in Action. He said, in general, the best way to facilitate skill transfer is to watch experts in action. Ideally, you're working alongside them. Watch them solve their problems and document how they mitigated operational surprises. I love this idea. In my case, Outify's work style is remote, so if I don't know how my peer investigated the problem, I ask them on Slack after it's been resolved and write a new document. The third piece of advice is to write Runbook. This may be a well-known concept, but let me explain it briefly. It's a detailed how-to guide for completing a commonly repeated task or procedure within a company's IT operations process. It guides an operator by step-by-step instructions. It's sometimes known as a playbook. The merit for your team is that Runbooks are a shared wealth of knowledge and expertise that would otherwise be kept solely in the hands of subject matter experts. A subject matter expert is a person who is an authority in a particular area or topic. Once you put it on, you will be able to take over its operation. At this point, you can start participating in service operations. Writing runbooks will mitigate common system anti-pattern called only Brent knows. The book Operations Anti-Patterns DevOps defines this anti-pattern. The book said, unless purposeful action is taken, information tends to coalesce around key individuals. It makes those individuals incredibly valued, but also equally burdened. Your documentation work will reduce the burden on experts by sharing their knowledge and expertise. Besides, this is only possible because of you. The book Software Engineering at Google said like this: the first time you learn something is the best time to see whether the existing documentation and training materials can be improved. You are the best person to write a new runbook if your team doesn't have a document about it. A good runbook answers these questions. Specifically, I would recommend you answer the third and fourth questions in your document. Regarding the third question, what dependencies does it have? Modern systems are distributed systems, and in some cases, external services are involved in one case. This information is beneficial to understand the system architecture. The fourth question: what does the infrastructure for it look like? Is also a good question to understand the system architecture. Writing these parts is a great opportunity to organize your learning and form reusable knowledge for the team. You may feel uncomfortable writing runbooks because you don't feel you can write perfect, useful documentation for the team. However, the book Seeking SRE mentions this concern like this. City First Draft. An imperfect document is infinitely more useful than a perfect one that does not yet exist. You don't need to finalize the documentation perfectly. I would recommend you to be the first writer. Finally, let's recap 3 tips. First, let's look at problem reports even if you are not sure about them. Second, leave what you've learned in the documents. Thirdly, write runbooks for your team. The books and blogs mentioned in this presentation are listed on this slide. I hope this presentation would help you. Quite thank you for listening to my presentation.